222 of the most powerful people in the world were supposed to descend on island for a private retreat behind closed doors. But then the guest list leaked. And suddenly, Peter Thiel's secretive elite network, called Dialog, was dragged right out into the open for all to see. The venue that was supposed to host them pulled out, and the secret society was sent scurrying from the Emerald Isle. But this network of the world's most powerful people has been operating for 2 decades, and it plans to keep going for decades to come. So today, we're looking inside Peter Thiel's secret society, how it got exposed, the powerful people involved, and how the decisions taken by this group dictate your life and the world around us. My name is Nick, and you're watching The Finance Bureau. Now, let's start with how all of this actually surfaced, because it wasn't some elaborate cyber heist. In June 2026, a Swiss hacktivist who goes by the name, quote, Mala Arson Crime W, found Dialog's internal records readily accessible on its own website. That's right, guys, just sitting there in plaintext HTML of the organization's own website. The guest list was right there in the source code. And this wasn't a short list. The exposed material included a directory of 113 names, plus far more sensitive sets of somewhere between 192 and 222 retreat dossiers for the entire 2026 event. That's home addresses, private phone numbers, dates of birth, self-reported political leanings, food allergies, and private login credentials. All of it managed on a commercial spreadsheet tool called Airtable. But that's only the beginning of this crazy story, because this is a network co-founded by Peter Thiel. Yep, the same Peter Thiel who built Palantir, one of the most powerful surveillance and data analytics companies on Earth, a world where paranoia about data is the entire business model. And they left the guest list in the front-end code of the website. Crime W said it best herself. It's wild, she said, that the people who run the world are so confident in their safety that they don't bother with any proper operational security. And Dialog's response? Well, their managing director called it, quote, a hack executed by a well-known criminal, which is an interesting way to describe someone reading text you published yourself. But now for one of today's big questions. What exactly is Dialog? Well, Dialog was actually founded way back in 2006 by Thiel and an entrepreneur named Oren Hoffman. Now, publicly, it's presented as, quote, an invite-only intellectual community, which is anyone's guess what that actually means. The main idea, though, is to facilitate breakout discussions with one ironclad promise. Nothing said in the room ever leaves the room. Over 2 decades, thousands of participants are reported to have cycled through its retreats, though the exact membership numbers haven't been independently verified. And it spent that entire time refusing to disclose a single one of them. It's been described as Bilderberg meets Silicon Valley. And that's a fair comparison, but it undersells what makes Dialog a 21st century upgrade. Now, if you're not familiar, Bilderberg is the infamous closed-door summit where Western politicians, bankers, CEOs, and old money elites meet off-camera. But Dialog creates something new with the addition of some key groups. Tech capital, active duty military brass, and the people who write defense policy. And if you think this all sounds suspicious and weird, well, that's just for starters, because Dialog reportedly grades its members. According to the leaked data, attendees are ranked on a hidden internal system. A reporter describes it a couple of different ways. Either it's a value-add score from 1 to 4, or an A to C letter tier, and the two might even run side by side. Of 192 dossiers reviewed, 141 were graded B, and this grade isn't cosmetic. It reportedly determines your seating, your event access, and how much you pay, with membership fees reportedly reaching into the tens of thousands of dollars, sometimes discounted for the most famous names. In other words, a literal leaderboard for the elite, ranked by wealth and fame. Oh, and there's an interesting element. There's even a matchmaking app. The network runs an internal algorithm for networking and, yes, dating among members, pulling in political leanings and relationship preferences to generate introductions with photos and bios. A ranked, dating-enabled directory of the most powerful people on Earth. Bizarre. Now, let's see who's actually in it. But let's walk it back a tier because they care so much about ranking. And let's start with the sitting government. Senator Ted Cruz, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, Congressman Jim Himes, ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee, and none other than Jared Kushner. And now to the active military. General Alexis Grinkowicz, who's NATO's Supreme Allied Commander in Europe and the head of the US European Command, and Army Secretary Dan Driscoll. And then we have the defense money, Palantir co-founder Joe Lonsdale, and of course, Thiel himself. And then the tech and capital tier, Elon Musk, and reportedly former Google CEO Eric Schmidt, former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers, and to round it out, media and culture. New York Times columnist Ezra Klein and author and podcaster Sam Harris. Now, it's important to note that appearing on a leaked list doesn't equate to confirmed attendance. The dataset actually mixes members, guests, speakers, and one-time invitees, and a few names, including Josh Brolin and Joseph Gordon-Levitt, have reportedly disputed or distanced themselves from any involvement. But the core roster of policymakers and defense figures have been cross-verified across multiple outlets. And this is the major problem here, because these people should not be in the same off-the-record room. Consider for a moment what I just listed. The people who steer defense budgets and approve defense contracts are sitting in a closed room with the firms that win those contracts. No record, no minutes, no disclosure requirement of any kind. That is just as dodgy as it sounds. But let's dig a little deeper. Peter Thiel's Palantir is hardly some random vendor. In July 2025, the company was awarded a U.S. Army enterprise agreement valued at up to $10 billion over 10 years, consolidating 75 different contracts into a single software vehicle and locking the Army into Palantir's platform. Its U.S. government revenues surged 84% year-on-year in the first quarter of 2026 to $687 million. And in January 2024, Palantir entered a strategic partnership with the Israeli Ministry of Defense to provide AI-powered analytics explicitly for war-related missions. So think about that now. A defense contractor with $10 billion army deal and an active military partnership in a private room with the Army Secretary, the Treasury Secretary, NATO's top commander, and sitting members of the intelligence community. This is how policy actually gets shaped. This happens entirely in closed rooms, far away from public hearings and official transcripts. What we have here is essentially secret lobbying without any paperwork. And the absence of that paperwork isn't an accident. Now, there's obviously a lot to unpack here, and if you want to keep up with stories like this, the ones where power shapes the world and everything around it, then you should sign up for the Finance Bureau newsletter. It's absolutely free, and we break down everything regarding global finance, markets, politics, and macro trends, so you never miss what actually matters. All you have to do is click the link in the description or scan this QR code on the left of your screen to get started. And now, back to that secretive room. Because although it's supposed to be private, the leak actually gave some insight into what got discussed. On the geopolitical side, there was a session literally titled Navigating World War III. Another one on nuclear energy, sometimes framed as, quote, bring back nuclear. and sessions on battlefield technologies and the future of NATO. And from there, as if it wasn't weird enough, it gets flat out dystopian. Deepfakes, artificial intelligence, disinformation, and it gets even stranger. There was a session called Build a Cult, one called How's Your Sex Life, one titled It's Fun to Be in Charge, and a meditative psychedelic inquiry into the nature of reality. Yeah, so let's take a step back and try and piece this all together. The people with the actual power to start a world war or profit from one sat around workshopping cult building and their dating lives. You couldn't really make this up unless you were truly wired differently as a human being. Which brings us to the man at the center of all of it, Peter Thiel. Back in 2009, Thiel wrote a now infamous line titled, "I no longer believe that freedom and democracy are compatible." That's interesting, and it's the foundation of his entire worldview. The idea that mass democracy constrains what he sees as a creative minority. And his public commentary has only grown stranger and more apocalyptic. He's actually delivered lecture material interpreting the Antichrist not as a person, but as a world government bureaucracy that seizes power by weaponizing fear of threats like pandemics, climate change, and AI. He's publicly attacked the Pope over AI regulation. A Vatican tech advisor has reportedly called him a, quote, heretic. And it turns out one man's private philosophy actually impacts the rest of us. Thiel actively turns these theories into pipelines for political power. He backed J.D. Vance early, contributing $15 million to Vance's 2022 Senate campaign, and he's widely credited with lobbying to get Vance onto the 2024 ticket. Vance is now the vice president and is potentially a runner for the 2028 nomination. So guys, let's just connect the dots over here. A man who believes democracy limits freedom, who runs a defense analytics empire winning billion-dollar government contracts, whose political protege sits a heartbeat from the presidency, is now running a ranked, off-the-record network stuffed with generals and cabinet secretaries. This is, in effect, a permanent political infrastructure with incredible power. And that's what made Ireland's response to this madness so remarkable. Because on this occasion, the public actually pushed back. The Dialog retreat was booked for the Powers Court Hotel Resort in County Wicklow for August 12th to 16th. But a grassroots campaign called, quote, Drop Dialog mobilized against it. And their central argument connected Dialog directly to Palantir's role supplying AI targeting and surveillance technology. And the pressure worked. On July 3rd, 2026, the venue cancelled. Powers Court Estate said it was, quote, relieved and pleased the event had been called off, noting it had sought legal advice to exit the booking and had, in effect, been blindsided by what it had actually agreed to host. People Before Profit's Richard Boyd Barrett called it a victory for people power. And it was. But, although this battle may have been won, the war is not over. The venue was cancelled, but the network itself remains completely intact. No investigation was opened and no regulator stepped in. Dialog hasn't been disbanded. It was even reportedly in talks to buy a permanent campus in the Washington suburbs. The cancelled retreat certainly made for some big headlines, but the structure underneath it is completely untouched. And what this leak exposed is the operating system of a 21st century power. A room where defense money, state authority, and tech capital merge, off the record and apparently ranked by wealth, with the public locked out by design. Elections happen in public with cameras and transcripts and accountability. But it appears that the actual steering, the deals, the alignments, the priorities increasingly happens in rooms like this one. Rooms with a guest list you will never make and a grading system you'd never even qualify to be ranked on. So, what really got cancelled over here? The answer is almost nothing. The venue changed, but the system keeps running. the missing paper trail is why this network exists in the first place. You won't get minutes from a room that won't even admit it exists. So, who wins here? Well, the billionaires who fund it for starters, sitting comfortably in the top tier. The contractors who mingle with the officials who sign their checks. The politicians who get access to capital and influence the rest of us will never see. They walk away with the relationships, the deals, and the complete deniability. And who pays? You guessed it, everyone outside the room. The ordinary voter who's told the big decisions get made where they can be held to account. The taxpayer funding the $10 billion in contracts nobody debated. And the rest of us, ranked nowhere and invited never. But Ireland proved one thing worth holding on to. Public pressure still works. A grassroots campaign took a venue away from 222 of the most powerful people alive. Whether the pressure is kept up from here as Dialog seeks other arrangements remains to be seen. Well, that's all we have time for today, but what do you think? Do you believe the big decisions get made where you can vote on them? Or are the shots being called in a room you'll never be allowed in? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. And if you want to understand the surveillance machine at the center of all of this, how Palantir actually built its power and where it's pointed next, you can check out our video on that right over here. As always, thank you very much guys for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode. This is Nick, signing off.